Welcome, everybody, this morning to Business Essentials. My name is Pauline Chung. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing with the San Mateo Area Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome you this morning and welcome our speaker, Steve Budd. So Steve is a speaker, a writer, an English professor, and an award-winning solo performer. He's a member of the National Speakers Association. He's a certified virtual presenter and world-class speaking coach. Steve has an extensive background in sales, having sold real estate, business reference guides, and advertising. He enjoys helping business people craft their marketing messages and improve their presentation skills. Steve's a big fan of origin stories and has, after first hearing Kiplinger's How the Camel Got His Hump. Since then, his repertoire has expanded to include stories about the origins of Clif Bars, Stacy's Pita chips, and Airbnb, among others. Steve explains the origin stories as such powerful marketing tools and why every business can benefit from one. Steve provides tools and techniques to help entrepreneurs and business people craft their own compelling origin stories. So I ask that you stay muted during Steve's initial presentation. He will have a Q&A section, and if he wants to go interactive, please unmute yourselves then and participate. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Steve. You can use your chat to ask questions as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pauline. Great to be here. Have you heard the one about the two San Francisco roommates who were short on rent money? Ever been there? Well, these guys knew that a design conference was taking place nearby and that hotel rooms were hard to come by. They were like, maybe some of those out-of-towners might be willing to rent a bed from us. Like many 20-somethings, they didn't have much furniture. So they put out a couple of air mattresses for their guests. And just like that, Airbnb was born. Now you know how the company got its start and where the air comes from, the company name. Those air mattresses they put their first guest stayed on. And by the way, those two broke roommates, they're each worth over $3 billion now. That's billion with a B. Not a bad origin story, right? I think hearing about the company's humble start helps elicit an emotional response. How often have you had a problem creating an emotional connection with customers? How often have you had a problem selling your products and services? How often have you had a problem getting people to remember what you sell? Well, origin stories can help. By the end of this morning's presentation, you'll hear a number of origin stories and leave with the tools to create your own so that you too can generate that emotional connection that leads to more customers, more sales, and more profits. First, you're going to see why your origin story is important. Next, you'll discover what goes into your origin story. And then, most importantly, you'll find out how to tell a great origin story that will separate you from the pack and help you stand out from your competitors. Feel free to take notes, but at the end, we'll share a PDF with the main points. So you might ask, what are origin stories? Well, you just heard one, the story of Airbnb. An origin story is the story about how you got started. Now, in ancient times, they were tales about how a tribe or religion or people came to be. They might explain the origin of some natural phenomenon like the seasons or the stars in the sky, or how the camel got its hump. But in marketing lingo, origin stories are stories about how your company got its start. These stories might be spread by PR people or the media. They might be on the About page on your company website, or they might be printed on your packaging. Why? Because people do business with those they know, like, and trust. The origin story checks all those boxes. Have you heard the legend of Gary Erickson? He was a bicycle mechanic living in a garage. And 30 years ago, right here in the Bay Area, Gary and a friend were out on a little bike ride, 175 miles. So they're on this epic trek, chowing down on energy bars. And finally, Gary turns to his buddy and says, I can't stand one more bite of these crappy energy bars. And then he had an epiphany and he said, I'm going to come up with my own great tasting bar. In 1992, after 2 years of working on the recipe in his mother's kitchen, Clif Bars was born. That former bicycle mechanic who was living in a garage at the time is now worth $850 million. Are you a fan of Clif Bars? When you look at the wrapper, what do you see? Did you ever notice the origin story printed on every Clif Bar? Think it has inspired you to reach for Clif Bars over some other protein bar? Think it might be one reason Clif Bars enjoys about 1/3 of the American energy bar market? People do business with those they know, like, and trust. And here's the key: get to the heart by sharing your start. Sharing the story of your humble beginnings helps you make that emotional connection. So does putting your name on the product. So you might be saying, Steve, it's not called the Gary bar or the Erickson bar. Who's Cliff? You want to know who Cliff is? Gary named the bars after his father. I'm pretty sure his mom was like, wait, you used my kitchen for 2 years and you named it after your dad? Research shows that origin stories will get customers, consumers to rave about your products and services. That's right, rave. Rave is an acronym for the results your company will gain from having a well-crafted origin story. And it's the why of origin stories, why you need one. Give me an R. With a good origin story, people will be more likely to remember your company. Give me an A. People will be more likely to act on your product offerings, meaning they'll buy them. Did someone just give me a V? With a good origin story, your company's perceived value will rise. Did I hear an E? People will emotionally connect with your company, like you have with Clif Bars. So, R-A-V-E. What do you got? Rave. Rave. And maybe, just maybe, you'll have a Fortune 500 company on your hands, or at least increased annual revenue. Get to the heart by sharing your start. That's what it's all about. Tell the public how and why your company got started. And your story, your origin story, will help you stand out. The same holds true if you're a sole practitioner, a lawyer or accountant or realtor, an electrician or consultant or speaker who's self-employed. Get to the heart by sharing your start. Are you a fan of Stacy's Pita chips, Annie's macaroni and cheese, Izzy's soda, Tom's shoes? All of these companies have compelling origin stories, stories you could tell at a dinner party, in the aisles of a supermarket or department store, or at a conference, trade show, or networking event. Let's start with Stacy's. Back in 1996, Stacy Madison and her then husband Mark ran a sandwich cart in Boston's Quincy Market. Their pita sandwiches were hugely popular, and at lunchtime, people lined up for them. The line stretched around the block, and you could expect to wait in line for upwards of half an hour. Sometimes people were like, forget this, I got to get back to work. Mark was like, Stacy, we're losing customers. What are we going to do? How did Stacy and Mark handle it? At the end of one day, they were about to toss out the stale pita bread. They look at the bread, look at each other, look back at the bread and say, wait a minute. They go home, chop up the bread into little pieces and bake it in the oven. They come back the next day and hand out the pita chips just so people will stay in line. And you know what happens next? Customers were like, forget the sandwiches. I want these chips. They waited in line, and Stacy's Pita Chips was born. In 1998, Stacy and her husband started wholesaling the pita chips. By 2006, it was a $65 million business, which PepsiCo later purchased for $250 million. Now that's a lot of bread. That's the origin story. Get to the heart by sharing your start. Again, people do business with those they know, like, and trust. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Think about the start of Airbnb, Clif Bars, Stacy's Pita Chips. Each one of them got to the heart by sharing their start. And it can be broken down to 3 S's. These entrepreneurs saw a problem, solved the problem, and started a company to share their solution with others. The three S's: saw, solve, start. Airbnb saw the problem of a shortage of hotel rooms, solved the problem by putting out air mattresses, and started a company. Gary Erickson saw a problem of energy bars that didn't taste very good, solved it by creating his own better tasting bar, and started a company. Stacy and Mark saw a problem with customer retention, solved the problem by giving away pita chips, and started a company. And a whole new category of snacks. Speaking of snacks, have you ever tried the cassava or plantain chips produced by Artisan Tropic? Their origin story includes the three S's, but in a personal way. Listen to this, which is from the side of their package. The best things really do come from family. Artisan Tropic started when our daughter, Maka Guzman, was very sick, and we began focusing on drastic dietary changes. This paved her way back to health, and Whole Foods became a new passion for us. Now we're sharing our enthusiasm for nutritious eating, including snacking. Join us on our wholesome adventure. They get to the heart by sharing their start. And the three S's: they saw a problem with their daughter's health, solved it with a new diet, and started a company to share the solution with the rest of us. That's the formula. The only thing they didn't do was name the company after their daughter, the way other companies have, like Amy's Kitchen and Izzy's Sodas. When you first started out, what problem did you or your company see? How did you solve it? What company or product line did you start to share your solution with your customers? Those are the three S's. And it's the what of your origin story. What goes into it? The three S's are the beginning of the design of your origin story, which will create that emotional connection that leads to more customers, more sales, and more profits. Take a moment to reflect on your three S's, something you saw, solved, and started. And if you're so inclined, share a sentence or two with us in the chat. I'd love to see what you've been up to. Or if you want to raise your hand and actually speak out loud, you don't feel like writing right now, we can do it that way. Does anybody feel compelled to share something about one or two or three of the S's that were part of the beginning of your career story? Maybe something you're doing now or did 20, 30 years ago? I see you're thinking, Regina. You think there's anything you want to share, or is nothing quite coming to your mind that fits? Anything off the top of your head, feel free to share it with us. You can type it in the chat or say it out loud.
Well, a company that I'm working with, which is called Legal Shield, ID Shield, the problem that they saw was that many people could not afford the services when they needed them as it relates to being able to speak with an attorney. So that was a problem that they saw. They solved it by setting up this subscription service called Legal Shield. And the service is such that, and I do it all the time, if I have an issue that I'm really concerned about, even though my daughter is an attorney, she's working up in Washington. I live in California, so I call my company and I say, here's my issue, here's my problem, I need some legal advice, I need some consultation. And I really appreciate having that opportunity, and I can do it not only in California, but I can call and say, well, my issue has to do with a company or something that's happening in Ohio or Pennsylvania, and they'll put me in touch with an associate who practices law in that company. So that was the way that they solved that. And the company that they started was Legal Shield. It's called Legal Shield now, but it started as being called something else, prepaid legal. That's what it was called initially, and it's grown into Legal Shield. So even though it wasn't something that I saw and solved, it was a problem that they saw to make legal services something available to every person.
Sure. The founders saw some kind of a problem, exactly, with affordability and accessibility, and it
really started with the founder having this problem himself.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so right there, the founder has a great origin
exactly.
story. Yeah, excellent. Thanks for sharing that. That's a good illustration. Peter, did you have something you wanted to share?
As soon as I unmute, My company, Steve, is called 143 Digital, 143 Digital. And I grew up in northern New Jersey, and my dad and my uncle were very successful home builders, and they built planned unit developments before there was such a concept as planned unit developments. And they sold out their second units, 180 homes in less than 3 weeks. And they had carved out 7 acres above the subdivision for their own 2 homes. And they built their own custom homes on 7 acres. And so my cousins and I grew up as brothers and sisters with my own brothers and sisters. Long story short, my uncle was a greatest generation veteran and really didn't have the capacity to talk about love and talk about emotions. And so at the very rare instances that he, the president of our corporation, took us to school, as opposed to my father, my mother, my aunt, Scotty, he would, as his children departed the car, as opposed to saying, have a good day, I love you, he would just say 143, I love you. So I created the name of my company, I Love You Digital, because I love what digital does for people. And I love the power that it gives my clients to attract new clients from people who go to the web with nobody in mind.
Wow, that's great. Excellent.
I've come to find out in watching the story about Fred Rogers that he was so enamored with 143 that he always carried $143 in his pocket, not 150, not 125. And he maintained his weight at 143 as well his entire life.
Wow, that's interesting. That's something most of us probably didn't know. Thanks for sharing that, Peter.
Of course.
Excellent. That's good to hear from a couple of you. I'll give you more others of you who are interested in participating another chance a little bit later on. But yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Now, does every origin story follow this pattern of the 3 S's? No. Sometimes founders choose to tell the story of their scrappy early days when they struggled to stay afloat. That's the case with Annie's Macaroni and Cheese. The story printed on the box tells us that Annie and her husband Rob were the mail order department, the shipping department, the customer service department. They did everything together. They wrote the addresses on the packages by hand, packed them into their VW van, and dropped them off at the post office. That's the story of their humble beginnings. So why are origin stories like this so effective? For one simple reason: they get shared. People want to tell them to each other. So whether it's Bible stories or Greek myths or corporate origin stories, stories about Abraham or Arachne or Annie's Macaroni and Cheese, stories get shared, spread, repeated, and remembered. They're highly effective tools for customer acquisition, customer retention, and customer loyalty. These stories turn customers into your brand ambassadors who will happily share your story with others, which is going to bring you more customers, more sales, and more profits. Get to the heart by sharing your start. People do business with those they know, like, and trust. So a story like Peter shared, 143, people could say to others, you know what the 143 stands for? I love you. Wow, I didn't. Next thing you know, the company's name is getting spread far and wide. Are you a fan of Tom's shoes? Anybody wearing a pair right now? You might know the company's slogan, 1 for 1. In 2006, the company founder was traveling in Argentina. He saw lots of children growing up without shoes, and he wanted to help. His solution? He started Tom's Shoes, a company that matches every pair of shoes purchased with a new pair of shoes for a child in need. The company has since expanded to eyewear, bags, and coffee. Some of these company founders sound heroic, don't they? Well, it's not surprising. Origin stories often draw on elements of the hero's journey. There's a reason why myths and legends and religious tales that use this formula have been handed down from generation to generation for thousands of years. There's a reason why Hollywood uses this story formula. And the reason is, it works. It gets remembered and passed on. Here's the hero's journey in a nutshell. The hero leaves their home and strikes out into the unknown. They face tests and ultimately slay the dragon or overcome whatever dark force threatened their community. They return home with some elixir, blessing, or transformative message that changes their community for the better. If the hero were an entrepreneur, they'd start a company. Hercules would start a cleaning service for horse stables. Jesus might manufacture a product that changes water into wine. Let's take a look at a contemporary hero's journey. Tom's toothpaste. No connection to Tom's shoes, by the way. Raise your hand if you use Tom's toothpaste or know someone who does. Now, back in 1968, Tom and his wife, Kate, left Philadelphia for small town life in Maine. They were big fans of natural, unprocessed foods. And they were like, where's the natural, unprocessed detergent and personal care products? I don't see any. Do you see any? Guess what? There weren't any. Problem, right? So what did they do? In 1970, they started their own company, Tom's of Maine. Their first product, laundry soap. The toothpaste followed in 1975. The key elements here are essentially what we've already discussed, the 3 S's. See a problem, solve the problem, start a company to share the solution with others. Another way to think of this, though, in terms of the hero's journey, is with the 3 T's: tests, triumph, and transformation. Through conflict and challenges and battles and victories, the hero has an epiphany and returns home to share his or her lessons and transformation. Tom and Kate were tested by the lack of natural personal care products on the market. They triumphed by creating their own, and in so doing, they transformed the marketplace and millions of lives. That's what entrepreneurs and company founders do. And I'm guessing you have too. That's another one of your cues. Another cue. Time for you to write if you have a new idea, a different idea you'd like to share with us, or someone who hasn't shared already, to write a few sentences of your origin story in the chat. And think about it again. You can look at it as something you saw, solved, and started, or you can look at it as some kind of test, triumph, and transformation. It does not necessarily have to be a company. It could be an initiative of some kind. It might be the 3 S's or the 3 T's, or even just 1 or 2 of them. Let's just spend a couple minutes looking at those. Steve, are you out there? Another Steve, do you have something you could share about your business or somebody else? How about Peter? All right.
Wait, you didn't give me time to unmute.
I love what Peter has there. Fenway Park. That's warming my heart, being from Boston, the Boston area originally. Steven, do you want to share something with us?
Sure. Well, I'm glad you brought up Tom's of Maine, because I'm honored to know Tom's son, who lives locally here up in Petaluma area.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, you might not know, but he's a fellow festival goer. So we've become friends over the years, and I've had the opportunity to meet his dad and his mom. Even though they're in Maine, he's a California guy now.
Let's get back to you. Do you have a?
Oh, back to me. I have an origin story. I hope to resurrect it, but let's see, 2005, I was traveling in Europe. I'll try to keep it short, because I think that's one of the keys to origin stories. I was traveling in Europe and trying to schedule walking tours to get to know the city. And it took me days to find the right tour, the right time. And I ended up spending an extra day in Berlin just for a tour. And I realized, I had a cheap phone. It was pre-iPhone. Why can't we just get all of the information into a digital service so that I could dial it up and say, like free 411, describe a place and tell me about that place. And later that became Here Planet, which is the startup that I started and launched along with the iPhone. When that came out, it made it possible. And we had a huge launch in 2009. That company has since been put on the back burner, but I think it's a great origin story and might be ready for resurrection.
Yeah, Here Planet. That's excellent. Very cool. Cool story. Thanks for sharing that. Somebody else want to share something with us? No? All right. I won't force you. We'll get back to business. Now, you might be wondering, Steve, What about you? Do you have your own origin story? Funny you should ask. I'm a speaker, writer, actor, and coach, and I've also worked in sales, selling books, advertising, and real estate. Raise your hand if you are or have ever been in sales. Yeah, I see a few hands there. You want to hear how I got my start? Good answer. In my late 20s, I was acting in a play, playing a salesman, and sometimes audience members would come up to me afterward and say, "You'd make a great salesman. You're so persuasive. You should do this for real." Were they telling me to get a real job? I filed that information away. And 2 years later, I followed an Israeli girlfriend to Tel Aviv. My savings were running low, but I'm thinking, I'm not ready to go back home. I need a job. But first, the beach. I sat down on the sand and started leafing through a tourist magazine. Most of the pages were full of ads. Somebody had to sell them. I remembered what those audience members had said to me. I could sell advertising. I applied for the job and got it. I went out on sales calls with my boss and watched him turn no's into yeses. Soon enough, I was doing the same. That kept me in Israel for another year. Do you see the 3 T's in my story? I was tested by the need to find a job. I triumphed by landing that sales job. And I was transformed into an honest to goodness salesman, not just a guy who played one on stage. When I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in 2004, guess what my first job was? Selling ads for a weekly newspaper, the East Bay Express. Great skills to have because we're always selling. As my boss in Tel Aviv used to say, there are 2 human activities, buying and selling. If you're out there selling, you're bound to run into someone who's buying. Now, nod your head if you agree with me. When you're in business, you're in sales. When you're interviewing for a job, you're in sales. When you're dating, you're in sales. Anytime you're up for a new job or relationship, you have to sell yourself. As a speaker and actor, I do that a lot. Having a good origin story, your own, can help. In classic tales, the hero spends time and grows in a dungeon or cave or belly of a whale, or while living abroad. That's where the hero struggles and figures things out. The equivalent of that in American corporate mythology, the garage. Where was the first Apple computer created? In a garage. Remember Gary Erickson? While working on the Clif Bars recipe, where was he living? In a garage. Other companies that started out in a garage? Hewlett Packard, the Walt Disney Company, Mattel, and Amazon. I know what you're thinking. If I want to make it big, I better spend more time in my garage. You now understand why to tell origin stories, to get the public to rave about you. You want customers to remember you, act on your offers, value you, and emotionally connect. And you know what goes into origin stories. The 3 S's: saw a problem, solved it, started a company, like Steven was telling us with Here Planet, or the 3 T's: tests, triumph, and transformation. But it's important to know how to best tell an origin story, how to tell one. Some people have an origin story, but it doesn't work. It isn't catchy. And you know why? Because there's no life in it. The way to breathe life into your story is to use what I call the CPR formula. CPR is an acronym in this case for conflict, plot, and resolution. The basic building block, of course, is plot, a series of events. You need to have a story arc along with characters and setting. In the early days of your company, when it was just being formed, maybe before it was formed, who was involved? Those are the main characters. Where did it take place? In Berlin or somewhere else? That's the setting. But early in your story, in that plot, you need to have a conflict or problem. That's where the story comes alive. And as they say, the plot thickens. The conflict is the hook. The founders of Airbnb had a conflict. They couldn't pay their rent. Gary Erickson had a problem with power bars that didn't taste good. Stacy faced disgruntled customers. The founder of Tom's Shoes struggled to solve the problem of shoeless kids. You creators of Tom's toothpaste didn't want to use toothpaste that was full of chemicals. These entrepreneurs struggled to solve these problems and came up with great solutions, which is the R of CPR, the resolution or happy ending. To identify the resolution of the story, answer this question. How did things change when you or another entrepreneur overcame the conflict? What's the happy ending? For Airbnb, it's paying the rent and providing an alternative to hotels. For Gary Erickson, it's creating a tasty energy bar. For Stacy, it's inventing a great snack. For Tom's Shoes, it's providing shoes for poor children. For Tom's of Maine, it's producing a natural toothpaste. For Legal Shield, it's providing affordable and accessible legal consultation and services. You guys ready for some comic relief? How about a tongue-in-cheek origin story? This one is printed inside the top of the egg carton from Uncle Eddie's wild hen farm in Petaluma. Things were moving so fast that I don't know when it happened. All I know is that Uncle Eddie had all of our nieces and nephews in the hen house with catcher's mitts, and the wild hens were up in the rafters, right? And everybody was catching eggs as fast as they could. And I said to Uncle Eddie, these eggs aren't just for our friends and neighbors anymore. It looks like we're in the egg business. And as he dove past me, making an heroic catch, he yelled out, I hate to admit it, Daisy, but I think you're right. What impact do you think this story has? It gets people to rave about them. The story helps people remember Uncle Eddie's eggs, act on their message, value the company, and emotionally connect. People do business with those they know, like, and trust. And the CPR elements are there. Plot, cousins gathered to catch eggs. Conflict, the hens up in the rafters and the eggs dropping fast. Resolution, going into the egg business. I hope you guys will share your story with someone, one or more of your origin stories with someone close to you, a friend or loved one later today, maybe on the phone or in person, and ask them for theirs, and then maybe do some free writing, write for 5, 10, 15 minutes nonstop, just trying to generate material of your origin story. You never know what you might come up with. You'll probably generate lots of useful material this way with free writing, and perhaps you'll uncover your epiphany or big bang, the moment you knew your brand must be born. Before we launch into the few minutes we have left for Q&A, I just want to recap. But first, you guys have been such a great audience. I'd like to give one of you a complimentary half-hour consultation during which I'll work with you on creating or improving your origin story. Or if you prefer, I can coach you on a speech or presentation you're working on. To win this free prize, and make sure it's something you want before you enter, be first to type the answer to the following question into the chat. Are you ready? When he got the idea for Clif Bars, Gary Erickson was on a long bike ride. How long was it? Put your answer in the chat. Did somebody answer? Let's see. I heard 10 hours. Well, I'm looking for miles. Anybody remember the amount of miles? Peter Tandy is the lucky winner, the first to come in. He just edged out Stephen Eckman. Peter Tandy, 175 miles is correct. Great. Well, connect later so we can set up that free half hour. Excellent. Congratulations. To recap, the why of origin stories, those problems you may have had with creating an emotional connection with customers, selling your products and services, or getting people to remember what you sell, all that is behind you. Armed with your origin story, your very own mini saga, you'll get customers to rave about your company and your products and services. They'll remember you, act on your offers, value you, and emotionally connect. Remember the key components of these marketing messages, the what of origin stories, the 3 S's and the 3 T's. See a problem, solve the problem, start a company to share the solution. Or in more heroic terms, tests, triumph, and transformation. And don't forget the how. Breathe life into your origin stories with CPR, conflict, plot, and resolution. And the next time you book a place through Airbnb or reach for a Clif Bar or grab a bag of Stacy's Pita chips, think about their origin stories and what sets them apart. I hope later today you'll get started on your origin story. My email is in the PDF I'll be sharing, and I'll put it in the chat so you can follow up with me if you'd like to work together on your origin story. Please connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn. And remember, get to the heart by sharing your start, even if it wasn't in a garage. All right, I'm ready for some. Oh, thank you. Thanks for being here and playing along. I'd love to hear from some questions you might have, questions or comments that come to mind. You can unmute yourself and share it with us. Anybody? Don't be shy. I'm just going to put my my email in the chat.
How is it selling advertising in Israel? I know English is their second language, but did you have to learn Hebrew on the fly or what?
Actually, just basically everybody speaks English as a second language, so they were happy to do business with me in English. So I learned a little bit of Hebrew, like kind of a street level, which I was able to use to get by. But in general, I did all the negotiating, presenting and negotiating in English, and that probably gave me a little advantage. But yeah, it went pretty well. It was a tough job, pounding the pavement kind of sales job, but I was able to bring in a lot of advertisers, so it worked out pretty well. Yeah. Anybody want questions about origin stories or I'm a speaking coach as well. I work with entrepreneurs and business people and salespeople on improving the content and delivery of their presentations. So that's something I could help you with as well. You can check out my new website. It should be launched tomorrow, stevebudd.com. I don't think it's available today, but it should be tomorrow. Any questions or comments about the Red Sox, Peter, or anything else?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
I have a question. Okay, obviously, hey, origin stories is a great way to go. But let's say if you don't have a great origin story, what's your second best marketing idea?
Second best marketing idea, I guess, would be like a success story or accomplishment story, telling the story of something you did that shows your values and your skills and strengths. So that would be another kind of great story to share. Or just how you got started, why you chose to do.
Okay.
What's your work, by the way, or that you're.
Pizza, pasta. Pizza.
You own a shop, or you?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So a pizza store, pizza shop, restaurant. Excellent. I guess why you chose to do that, where the recipes came from, any kind of family lineage that with that could be interesting. Where you got that spirit or desire to go into business for yourself. Those could be, stories there as well. But definitely a success story or some of the initial struggles maybe with the business, conflict, with getting started. Like, you always hear about businesses having trouble maybe getting permits or overcoming bureaucracy or whatever, or getting investors, whatever the case may be. There could be some good stories.
Plenty of those stories.
Yeah. So, yeah, any good story that's going to help people remember you and connect emotionally is going to be to your advantage. I hope that helps. Where did you grow up, Peter?
Boston.
Right in the city itself?
No, just outside a suburb called Swampscott next to Marblehead in Salem.
I grew up in Arlington. So.
Oh, really? Okay, great.
Yeah. Arlington, I should say.
My wife is from Meffa.
Okay, yeah. I lived in Somerville for quite a while too, after college. Anybody else have any questions or comments, things you wondered about, things you want, a little snippet of a story that you think could be the heart of your own origin story or marketing message?
Steve,
I have that.
Oh, I hear two people at once.
sorry, let me mute. Go ahead.
Angela?
Yes, I'm here. So I own a business and I'm a licensed insurance agent. My agency is called Life Stages Insurance and Financial Services. And it's a name that I really feel that resonates with how insurance agents should operate. We're not there to help you make, we're there to protect, not so much to give you, help you make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Our job is you're supposed to make a lot of money, and our job is to help you protect the money you make. Okay. and that, has to looked at over your entire life stage, not just, one point in time that you need this, but whatever you need, because insurance is such a long-term buy, you need to look forward to what you're going to be going through in the future and have that piece in place today. And I think, today, selling insurance is a problem. I mean, and servicing it is a problem too. People know that you get a huge commission and then you kind of ditch your customer to go to find the next one. I think that's terrible. I mean, I think selling is service. You have to be there as an insurance agent for your customer, for your client when they need a product. That's the reason why you sell it.
I hear you. I hear what you're saying. So you're trying to ask something about how to tell what kind of marketing message to share, or what? Do you have a question about that for me or others?
Well, I mean, that's kind of why the name is Life Stages, and I myself went through a lot of changes in my life. I mean, my husband had to have a kidney transplant. I mean, he went on dialysis, he went on Medicare, he had a kidney transplant. I had, all these personal experiences kind of made me realize that that's my story. I mean, I want to be there to help people through the events in their life stages.
Yeah. So right there, you have a personal
and it's because
story.
of and it's because of my own events
Right.
that I had to go through.
Is that something you've shared with prospects or clients or customers in the past?
I have, but it's something I really need help with. I mean, that's and what you went through today is like, I mean, my question is, how do you engage with a person that you want to help? I mean, how do you help them take that story to the next level?
I guess, well, you want to uncover what their need is or what their problems are. You want to get to that, something that they're struggling with or concerned about or anxious about, and see if there's something you can provide that will help fill that need, and by sharing the story of how insurance helped you in your time of need could be, a good illustration. It's going to help people connect and realize you're not just out there to make money, you're out there to help them. But if you want to email me, we can try to set up a time to talk about it and see if there's something else, some other way in which I can help you develop that into a story.
Yeah, I mean, that would, that would be really helpful. I mean, I need to have a website, and and I keep thinking I need to put my story on a website.
Sure.
And having, this presentation, it just kind of tells me that, there are people, there help out there.
Uh-huh.
And
sure. Well,
I'll reach out to you.
Great. Well, I'd love to be in touch with you. You have my email, so you can shoot me an email and we can be in touch. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
Paul.
maybe one more person before
Yeah,
we wrap up.
Pauline, I saw a question in the chat from Malcolm. He said, how long should an origin story be? So maybe that'll be our last question, because I know we're over the allotted time as it is. But I'd say you should have a couple versions. You can have a short version like the elevator pitch type thing, a couple minutes, a minute or two. It can be a really short, it can be less than a minute, very succinct story, like some of the stories I shared, that's going to, immediately make an impact. And of course, then you want to be able to elaborate on all those stages and say more about each part of your origin story. So that could be on your website, a longer version. It could be when you're sitting down with someone and have more time, a few minutes that you could take to tell your origin story. I don't think it would take much more than that. Yeah, it's been great to be here with you all and to hear your examples and your questions. Thank you for joining. And please be in touch with me if there's some way in which I can help you with your origin story or presentations in general. Like I said, my website will be available tomorrow, stevebudd.com. Hopefully tomorrow, or just email me, stevebud3@gmail.com. I know, Pauline, you send out a follow-up email and you're going to share a PDF I put together with some of the main tips and acronyms, reminders of what I talked about today, right?
Yes, I will send out your PDF and also the link to this recording which will be on the Chamber's YouTube page.
Fantastic. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you, Steve. This was very good. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.